Dear delegates, colleagues, and friends, thank you so much for joining us for this event on gender and national climate policies, which is also the launch event for the virtual gender marketplace. My name is Wiebke Bender, Gender Program Officer at UN Climate Change Secretariat, and I am honored to welcome you to our event. There is an interpretation option provided for today's event, so if your preferred language is French or Spanish, please click on the respective icon and select your language. If you are joining us on the COP26 platform, that icon should be at the top of your screen. Interaction during the event today will be limited to the chat, but all our speakers today will be at the virtual gender marketplace, where you will have many opportunities to engage with them and with each other. The virtual gender marketplace is a conference and networking space combining web-based video calling and a 2D virtual world. This means that participants will be able to more naturally interact with one another and be able to network and exchange experiences. During this event, you will receive a comprehensive update on the state of gender integration into national climate plans. The NDC Synthesis Report has shown that parties are increasingly referencing gender in their nationally determined contributions. Comparing new and updated NDCs to the previous NDCs of the same parties shows that the number of parties referencing gender in their NDCs has tripled. Today, we will be able to hear more detailed information on how countries are integrating gender into their national climate plans as representatives of the United Nations Development Programme, International Institute for Sustainable Development, International Union for Conservation and Nature, the African Development Bank, and UN Women will present their recent analyses. Our speakers will also share their reflections on lessons learned and opportunities. Finally, we will end the event with a brief introduction to the virtual gender marketplace on how to join it and how to engage with others. COP26 participants can register and join via the platform. Those who do not have access to the COP26 platform can register via the link shown on the screen, bit.ly/gendercop26. Late and last-minute registrations are accepted. However, due to technical restrictions, there can be some delays in access being granted. I now invite Fleur Newman, Action Empowerment Lead at the UN Climate Change Secretariat, to take the floor and guide us through the next session.
Thank you, Wiebke, and we will now move on to presentations on gender in national climate plans. Please ensure your interventions are kept to 4 minutes. We'll start with Verenia Chow, Program Specialist, Climate, Gender and Inclusion at the United Nations Development Programme. Please turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And hi. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you to the UNFCCC Secretariat and the gender team for the invitation. I would like to share the progress and results from the UNDP Climate Promise initiative in supporting developing countries in integrating gender equality considerations in their updated nationally determined contributions or NDCs. Through our climate policy work at the national level, UNDP is supporting 115 countries on the ground to strengthen gender in their NDC enhancement and implementation processes. We believe the NDCs offer a unique opportunity for integrating gender-responsive measures at scale and more comprehensively into climate action. The NDC sectors, as we have already seen, in a way, will cover the whole economy rather than just isolated policies and projects. In this regard, UNDP is supporting countries in setting up the enabling conditions and building blocks to lead to tangible outputs and results to inform NDC revision and implementation processes from a gender perspective. As of mid-October, of the 79 NDCs that have been submitted from climate promise countries, 76 of them included references to gender. More specifically, countries have better acknowledged the critical role of women and girls in their second generation NDCs compared to the first NDCs. At a general level, 96% of second generation NDCs refer to the gender equality or women. Only 46% made this reference in first NDCs. More explicitly, areas in which we see progress are, for example, sectors, where 68% of NDCs now include reference to women, gender in relation to sector areas. In 2015, it was only 16%. So relevant sectors are in mitigation, energy, LULUCF, waste and transport, and in adaptation, food security, health, water, and disaster risk reduction. Another area is increased analyses of gender women's and roles in NDCs. For example, 62% of NDCs describe women in a more nuanced way in relation to a set of vulnerability and capacity themes as compared to only 6% in 2015. For example, in relation to livelihoods, disasters, health, and income. Participation. 43% indicate they will target the participation of women in programs for increased access to resources and training and skills. None did in 2015, and this is crucial. Actions and measures. More NDCs are including gender-responsive measures and actions in mitigation, 24% in 2021 versus 3% in 2015, and 52% in adaptation versus 13% in 2015. Now, we have also, can we move to the second slide, please? Thank you. Yeah. Now, we have also analyzed areas that still need further support on. Targets and indicators are low across mitigation and adaptation, respectively. Finance. Only 22% of NDCs make reference to gender and climate finance, and MRVs, 25% of NDCs indicate they will include gender in their MRV systems. Finally, it is interesting to mention
Sorry, Brania, if you... Yep. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Sorry, Verania, we had a slight technical hitch there. Thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And you know, it really is, I think, something for us to feel positive about, that there is this movement, but as equally, as you have said, there are areas which really need to be the focus for the next little while in order for us to actually make a change, particularly around finance and MRV. So thank you very much. So moving now to Angie Daze, who is the Senior Policy Advisor and Gender Equality Lead of the Resilience International Institute for Sustainable Development. Angie, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Fleur. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you all today, and thanks so much to the gender team for the invitation. So I'm just going to share a very brief update on integration of gender considerations in National Adaptation Plan, or NAP, processes. NAP processes are a key mechanism for advancing adaptation under the UNFCCC, and governments, civil society actors, the private sector, and development partners will be looking to NAPs to guide their investments in adaptation over the coming years. NAP processes put in place systems and capacities that are needed. Can you hear me now? Yes. Great. Sorry about that technical hitch. So we've worked with countries on a number of different things like targeted gender analyses. We've helped develop strategies for ensuring that climate action is gender responsive and facilitated establishment of institutional arrangements to better link gender and climate change, among other things. And alongside our work with countries, we've been tracking progress on integrating gender in NAP processes at the global level. And we've put out 2 synthesis reports so far, one in 2018 and one in 2020, and we'll release our next report early next year. We base these reports on systematic reviews of NAP documents using a methodology inspired by WEDO's review of NDCs. And we also look at other sources of information, such as NAP readiness proposals to the Green Climate Fund and anecdotal evidence gained through our interactions with our government partners. And we analyze trends and try to provide recommendations for the way forward. So though our next report is coming out next year, we do review the documents on an ongoing basis, so I can give a bit of an update on the current status. So among the 25 NAP documents that were submitted to the UNFCCC as of the end of September, 96 include references to gender. So basically, there's only one document that doesn't reference gender issues, and this is one of the earlier NAPs that was submitted. So all of the recent ones are integrating gender issues. The most common ways that gender is referenced are as a guiding principle for the NAP process or as an objective. The graphic that you see here is from our 2020 synthesis report, where we assessed progress since 2018 in 6 different areas. Based on available evidence, we found that there had been limited progress in establishing inclusive and gender equitable mechanisms for ongoing stakeholder engagement in NAP processes. We also found limited evidence that gender had been considered in the establishment of institutional arrangements. But on the other hand, and on a more positive note, we found that there had been significant progress in the use of gender analysis to inform adaptation planning and in positioning women as adaptation stakeholders. Next slide, please. So on this latter point of the positioning of women, it's interesting to note that 88% of NAP documents submitted by the end of September specifically mention women. What you see here in the graph is a comparison of the positioning of women in the documents in 2018 versus 2021. We find that women are most often positioned as a particularly vulnerable group. However, we're seeing more documents that explicitly recognize women as both stakeholders and agents of change in adaptation. And this is only an initial step, but it's a really positive one. So what I've been able to provide here is a really tiny snapshot of the progress we're seeing as countries work to integrate gender in their NAP processes. And I focused on the numbers because there's very little time, but in the reports, as well as the gender toolkit that we recently developed with the LEG and the Adaptation Committee for gender responsive NAP processes, you'll find many examples, concrete examples of what countries are doing to move this forward. So I'd encourage you to check these out for more details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angie, and thank you for keeping to time. And yes, there's a lot more to say on this, and hopefully we'll be able to hear more about that in a little while. So next up is Anna Victoria Roja, who's the Senior Gender and Climate Change Advisor for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN. And please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Fleur. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to be here with you all today. And I hope that you're able to see the slides. There you go. So I would like to first invite you to have a little bit of walk with me through what we are presenting today. Because today on Gender Day at the UNFCCC, we are launching IUCN's latest Gender and Climate Change report. So on gender and NDCs. And if we go to the first slide, and this is going to sound relatively similar to what Verania was mentioning, we are able to see that there is change. When we started this report, we looked into the NDCs that are publicly available on the UNFCCC website. And we, as with any research, you have to have a cut date. So our cut date was the 1st of September of this year. So granted, there are several NDCs that have come after that period. Nevertheless, it's very interesting to see that there is a very big difference in terms of the NDCs that are including gender equality in their text in this iteration of NDCs. As you can see, in 2016, it was less than 40%, while now we're very close to 80% of all the NDCs presented. Did I mute myself? Yeah, yes, perfect. Okay. So one of the things that we wanted to do with you today is just to entice you to download the report, right? And one of the things we wanted to share with you is how we also see differences in terms of regions. And for us, it was very interesting to see that all NDCs coming from the Latin American region and the Caribbean, by 1st of September of this year, they all included gender equality in one way or the other. They were very closely followed by Sub-Saharan Africa, which has consistently come up as a highly ranking region when it comes to gender equality in policies. But the other thing that we were very surprised to see, and I would like to say happily surprised, is that in contrast to 2016, we see that highly industrialized countries are also including gender equality in their NDCs. This did not happen 5 or 6 years ago. So we see at least half of them, by the time that we did this assessment, were addressing gender equality. And if we go to the next slide, the other thing that we wanted to share with you is that 6 years ago, 5 years ago, we're all thinking about gender as this goal, right? And it was very common to see that the references were to gender as a cross-cutting issue. But we wanted to understand if there was also progress in terms of understanding if we were moving towards implementation. So at the team, we decided to identify different elements that could ensure gender responsiveness. So not only the objectives, not only the activities, but are countries really conducting their gender analyses? Are countries, as Verania was saying, investing in M&E? Are we talking about gender budgeting? And to our surprise, we found a lot, and again, very positive surprise, we found a lot of these mentions. Also in terms of the involvement, not only of gender stakeholders, but even of the Ministries of Women's Affairs being brought into the table for implementation. And if you think that 8 elements for gender responsiveness is too much, we had at least 2 countries that were able to show text and commitment in all of these 8. So those, as you can see on your screens, are Cambodia and Moldova. And with that, I think we're coming to a close. Hope it's been 4 minutes. But I just want to thank you for your time, invite you to our website, and also so that you can go into the different case studies that we're pulling as examples of all the things and more that I've shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. And yes, I mean, I think there's a lot for us to be looking forward to in seeing also where these go. I mean, it's one thing to see them in the policy documents. It's quite another thing to see it in implementation. So this is a story that is ongoing. And next is I'd like to invite Camille Guénard, Senior Gender Expert, Power, Energy, Climate and Green Growth at the African Development Bank, to share some insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm replacing Ahmed Hamza, who hasn't been able to connect today. So yes, I have 4 minutes, right? Okay. And yes, thank you for the slide. I would like to start by presenting the last knowledge products that have been published by our gender and climate change departments, as they reflect the main emphasis areas we're focusing on at the strategic, policy and action plan levels. As examples, we conducted a study on the role of women in Uganda's plastic recycling economy. We elaborated a gender-responsive climate resilient solutions for 10 East African countries, and we published gender and climate vulnerability hotspot analysis at the continental level. And actually, working at the national, regional, and continental levels is quite a complementary way to mainstream gender at best in climate change activities, because we all know that each territory has distinct characteristics. Knowledge products are also pivotal as they influence the design, implementation, monitoring, reporting of climate change operations on the ground, because they raise awareness, they provide sex disaggregated data, and also recommendations on climate change issues. And they therefore efficiently contribute to improve gender integration. We also noted that knowledge products orient banks' financial mechanisms. For instance, the Africa Climate Change Fund, which mobilizes almost 25 million US dollars, launched a call for proposal last July on women and climate resilience. And I would like to also mention the Spark Plus as well, which is a clean cooking ecosystem fund that is benefiting to African women as they suffer the most from toxic fumes and wood collection induced by wood-fired cooking. And we also have at the bank the Canada African Development Bank Climate Fund, which capitalized 133 million Canadian dollars to provide concessional loans to climate change related projects with a strong gender lens. Again, with knowledge products, it can be like a privileged path to strengthen policy dialogue with our regional member countries. We conducted gender and sustainable energy policy briefs in collaboration with national governments, and we elaborated gender responsive action plan for the forest investment plan in Cameroon in cooperation with national line ministries and local development partners. This other slide, please. Thank you. Yes, knowledge products are, again, I'm insisting with that, but it's really important because more than to identify areas of special emphasis, it's also a way for us to highlight women in climate leadership and corporate governance. So we decided to join forces with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and the French Development Agency to create a gender and climate action fast-track initiative to work with public and private sector, and the objective is to select one country in which technical assistance and capacity building will be provided to empower women in climate change leadership and to make corporate climate governance gender responsive. I don't want to take too much time. I'm trying to cut my ideas. I just would like to speak about partnerships now, because it's not only about external partnerships, as I was speaking about EBRD and AFD, but it's also about internal collaborations, which are important to deliver in a holistic way. And we are trying to work as one bank to mainstream gender in climate change banks' flagship initiatives. So, for instance, we have the Desert to Power initiative, and the objective is to supply 10 gigawatts of solar energy by 2025 in the Sahel with solar energy, and to provide 250 million people with green electricity, of which around 51% are women, of course, in the 11 countries of the Sahel. So in this initiative, we have a strong gender component, and we make sure that at least 30% of women in jobs have jobs in the field of solar energy, which is quite a good challenge in the Sahel region. And we are also working at the policy level to ensure that the national energy policies are gender responsive. Then I just would like to conclude with the our initiative we have on affirmative action for women in Africa. And we had a project in Ghana to support 400 women-led micro, small and medium enterprises and farmer-based associations to access to agricultural technology and for being trained to elaborate bankable proposals and projects, and also to have access to information regarding weather, markets, and finance. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Amy Raggers, who's a PhD, who's an international consultant with UN Women's Office for Asia and the Pacific. Amy, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Fleur. And can you see my slides there? Good afternoon and good evening from wherever you are from. My name is Amy Reggers and I'm here on behalf of UN Women's Office for Asia and the Pacific to present on Asia Pacific's progress towards gender responsive NDCs. So perhaps building off what Verania and Anna have spoken out, we're going to zoom in to the Asia Pacific. And as part of a collaboration with UN ESCAP, UN Environment Programme and UN Women, we've conducted an assessment of climate ambition and the enabling factors to support the implementation of the NDCs in 49 Asia Pacific countries. And as part of this collaboration, UN Women set out to understand how gender and climate change links are being recognised in the NDCs. Next slide, please. So what did we do? We gathered evidence, but not just from NDCs. We went a little bit broader and a little bit deeper. So we looked at national communications, NAPs, climate change, laws, policies, strategies and plans. And then on the other side, we looked at CID or periodic reporting. We looked at Beijing national reviews, national gender equality laws, policies, strategies and plans as well. And the data was analysed, coded and scored and resulted in a 5-point scale for what we call the enabling factors. And so we used 4 enabling factors as the axis for analysis for the assessment. And these factors were developed as part of a preliminary assessment in 2020 on NDC implementation by our partners ESCAP and UNEP, and adapted for the purpose of assessing the gender dimension. So the 4 enabling factors we examined were gender in climate change mainstreaming, gender in climate change coordination, gender in climate finance, and gender in reporting, or MRV. And this gender analysis is integrated into the large data set of climate-related indicators, for example, on percentage reduction in greenhouse gas emission, etc. And it contributed to the overall score and the assessment of a country's climate ambition and enabling factors for NDC implementation. So what did we find? Next slide, please. This again is a snapshot of our findings, and I'd encourage you to find the report, and you'll find myself and my colleague at the marketplace, and we'll be able to share some more. But so under the first metric, and similar and in line with what we've been hearing already this afternoon, is there's been a huge increase in the integration of gender, and we found 10 out of 49 countries actually scored the highest possible score in gender mainstreaming and climate change. Under the second metric, we found 23% of countries have gender inclusive processes where climate change coordination mechanisms explicitly include the role of women's machineries and women's affairs. And importantly, also climate change is integrated and mainstreamed into gender equality frameworks at the country level. Under gender and climate finance, we found only 2 countries link gender and climate finance within explicit climate change fiscal frameworks or through gender responsive budgeting processes. And finally, a snapshot of the last indicator, we found 63% of countries in the Asia Pacific do not yet recognise the need for sex, age, diversity, disaggregated data or indicators in monitoring and reporting. So some really positive things and some areas we still need to work on. And this analysis really provides a baseline data of the integration of gender in the Asia Pacific NDCs and an assessment framework for really understanding how gender and inclusion issues are included in climate policy and how action's being taken. This approach is really going to be used as a, it can be used as a measurement tool as part of the 5-year NDC update cycle. And as part and under the initiative of the Empower project, commitment to building the evidence base on gender responsive climate action, and the findings are really being used to help target, support and catalyse action on improving gender mainstreaming and climate action in the region. Let me stop there and we can share the report with you and encourage you to have a look at more details and the methodology as well in the virtual marketplace. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks very much, Amy, and thank you all for sharing those quick insights into the different pieces of research. We have a few moments to now have a brief discussion. So if I could ask you to all turn your camera, to all our presenters to turn their cameras on. And I would ask each of you in turn to give sort of a couple of minutes of key lessons that you've learned or opportunities identified during the work that you've presented, and if you could give us your top one or two. So I'll start with you, Verenia.
Thank you, Fleur. Sorry that the audio was not great. You mentioned lessons learned.
I'll try again. What I want to hear is, yes, lessons learned or opportunities identified. What are some of the sort of key moments for you out of this research?
Perfect, thank you. I think we are having some issues with the audio. Anyway, yes, sure, thank you. Fleur, well, I think that in terms of lessons learned and opportunities, I believe there is a need, or there was a need, at least for the countries that we support, for a comprehensive framework. And so we have been working on this, and we have been applying a far more comprehensive framework to look at effective governance, inclusive planning, and integrated policy frameworks. So I would say that's one of the key lessons learned and opportunity for other countries to follow. The other would be dual leadership. I think it's been really great to have both institutions, ministries of environment and gender national institutions working together. I think this ensures a long-term commitment to implement the gender work. And then finally, maybe look at two more kind of like tools. One is to conduct gender analysis. This has proven to be a very effective vehicle to better identify the differences and to propose specific priorities. And the other one is about integrating gender into core planning. It's been a huge difference, to really focus on the core planning rather than developing, parallel processes. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I think this is a lesson for all of us working on any aspect of climate, is to make sure we're not working in parallel processes, but integrating things. So thank you. And now moving to Angie.
Thanks so much. I guess the first thing I would say is that overall, I feel there's much more awareness among our government partners that integrating gender is not a nice to do, but actually a must do if their NAP processes are going to be effective. And I think this is really backed up by the analysis of NDCs that we've seen today as well. And I was also going to advocate for gender analysis. I think we've really observed that it works. I think when we deal with environment ministries, for the most part, the teams that are leading NAP processes, and when we offer them evidence and we offer them analysis and we offer them practical, concrete things that they can do, they're ready to act on those recommendations. And they're ready to take the steps that they need to take. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that, we really need to treat these as iterative processes. Countries are reviewing and updating NAPs and NDCs over time. And this means that they may not get it perfectly on the first try, but there are opportunities to increase the integration of gender over time, to incorporate what's being learned. And I think we see this in both the NAPs and the NDCs. And just to say, as the NAP Global Network, we're going to continue tracking this and working to share lessons with the adaptation community. And a key part of what we're trying to do is also to facilitate learning across countries in South-South peer exchanges. And I think that exchange of knowledge among countries working towards the same objectives and against the same challenges is really important. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angie. And I think, again, some very key points in there. And it's good to hear the sort of reinforcement of tools like gender analysis and the power of those, but also that it's not just the analysis, it's the communication of the results and how important that is. So thank you. And next up, Anna.
Thanks, Fleur. I have to agree with Andy and with Verania on the sense that there's definitely a higher ambition showed and a higher understanding of what gender equality is really all about. The other thing that for us was very interesting is when we did this analysis to understand that their countries are also becoming more aware of intersectionalities. So again, we also saw, for example, 19% of NDCs are referencing indigenous peoples, and sometimes in those reference specifically women, indigenous women. We also saw that 40% are referencing youth, and at least 4% were directly speaking about LGBTQI groups. So that was really interesting to see that it's not only that it's about gender mainstreaming and gender inclusion, but we're also becoming more aware of all these other different intersectionalities, all these different layers that may help us to be more resilient or hinder our possibilities. And I guess if we're thinking about what's the challenge of what next, there is quite some attention, I would say, to bring in this activities to the national level, which will imply capacity building at national level. Because yes, it is very important that we have both those who are knowledgeable in climate change and gender at the table. We need to be able to understand each other and speak the same language. And that comes with a lot of awareness, creating this bridges for knowledge, and the research. I mean, we cannot continue doing policy, or we need to strengthen our policy with gender analyses, having robust M&E systems that allow us to have that at least gender disaggregated data, but construct more robust statistic documentations. And I'll speak also to what Verania was saying in the beginning. I mean, the betting on coherent national processes, what at IUCN we call the CC gaps, the climate change interaction plans, that is also might be a very, very useful tool for countries to ensure that this high level ambitions can also be brought at a different level within their national policies. So I think that those would be my two takeaways for next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, capacity building continues to be something that is vital. It's also not something you do one off, and it's something that is iterative with the process. So thank you for that. And next, I would ask Kami.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, in terms of challenges, I won't make an exhaustive list, of course, but we already mentioned quite a lot. But for Africa, I would say that we are missing a lot of sex disaggregated data and a lack of awareness raising. And also, as you said, Anna, capacity building, and it comes with technical assistance. So it's like this package where we are trying to address, and it conducts to an insufficient number of women in climate leadership, and the consequences, and in climate corporate governance as well. So what we learned, I would say that we are trying now, based on that, to combine private and public financing. And we also decided to focus on climate adaptation on the African continent. So I don't know if we will be able to reach 50% of financing in resilience, but at least we are trying to make a priority. And it's in the climate change action plan of the bank, we have this priority, and I know that the bank mobilized like $3.5 billion in 2019 for adaptation. So it's quite a good start. And we also have an adaptation benefit mechanism at the bank. And this is a tool to de-risk and incentivize investments. And the idea is to create a certification. And it is expected that certificates of the benefits of specific adaptation activities issued by a reputable international organization like the bank will guarantee the credibility of the adaptation activities and increase the attractiveness to potential investors. So we are currently developing this mechanism, and we are trying to make it gender responsive as much as possible. And yes, we have some projects already on the ground. And for instance, we have multinational projects in 6 African least developed countries, and we improve the resilience of local communities let's say 450,000 direct beneficiaries, among half are women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this is also that speaks to the iterative process as well, and in seeing how it goes and where you go with the adaptation funding. And again, it's the stories that we want to hear as we go through and see the results. And so finally, Amy.
Thanks, Fleur. I think without echoing too much of what everyone has already said, I can't sort of agree more that the momentum is building, and particularly, and we saw as well when we looked at that sort of global landscape that presented, Asia Pacific is really ramping up. That momentum is building, and there is this sort of cross-country learning that is happening. Angie and I were both recently at some of these sorts of events, trying to build that momentum, share the learning, create, catalyze that change. I think one of the really, I guess, interesting and unique parts, particularly about this research, was looking at not just the NDCs and the climate national plans, but also really trying to understand how gender and climate change links are part of the sort of gender equality frameworks and the national commitments on reducing gender inequalities, not just through national level commitments, but then also our periodic reporting to CEDAW, our Beijing national reviews. We see more and more commitment here, and I guess really those links are getting stronger and stronger between the ministries of environment as well as the ministries of women's affairs. So let's see what the next 5 years bring and all the updates along with that.
Thank you. And I think this is, it's an important point about the different international frameworks and the fact that the Commission on the Status of Women will have a focus on climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction, gender equality in the context of that policy making. Those linkages, I think, become stronger once we also have that coherence across those frameworks, and I would expect to see some more movement in the direction we're seeing already as a result of that focus next year. So thank you all very much, and the presentations and reflections, I think, provide a great basis for further discussion and engagement, and we will conclude this event with what we hope will be a smooth transition to the virtual gender marketplace.
Thank you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed the launch event for the Virtual Gender Marketplace and are keen to join us there now. To get to the marketplace, you open the COP26 platform, and once you've joined the platform, find the poster gallery on the left side menu. On this page, you can also find a tutorial and a guide for how to use GatherTown, the platform that we are using for the Virtual Gender Marketplace. If you are not registered for COP26, go to the Gender at COP26 website. We hope you enjoyed the launch event for the Virtual Gender Marketplace and are keen to join us there now. To get to the marketplace, you open the COP26 platform, and once you've joined the platform, find the poster gallery on the left side menu. On this page, you can also find a tutorial and a guide for how to use GatherTown, the platform that we are using. Once you click Join and are able to see the GatherTown interface, you will then be able to modify your avatar and join the platform. Our team is working very hard to grant you access as soon as possible. However, there are some technical limitations and it may take some time. Once you are on the platform, you can walk up to other people, or rather their avatars, and interact with them. Your video will pop up at the top of your screen once you're close to other avatars. Make sure not to miss the poster exhibition, where experts, including speakers from this launch event, are presenting their work. There are other fun features in the marketplace that you can explore, like for instance, our poetry corner. Interact with objects when you're in their vicinity, just click on the X. The space is large, but don't worry, we have included maps everywhere. You will also be able to find a guide for how to use GatherTown, and in case you have any issues that are not explained in the guide provided, please come to our information desk and speak to the gender colleagues who are there. Now, please join us.